most guys know what they need to do: be a better father, be a more present husband, be more calm, be less angry, don't drink as much, don't sit in front of the TV as much. But what they don't know how to do is how to actually do the thing that they know that they ought to do. So,
Yeah.
what I do is I teach mental resilience.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't. And we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hersh Rephun. And if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes.
Today on Truth Tastes Funny, my guest is Jason Lyle. Jason is the founder of Sacred Grit, a men's coaching movement helping fathers and leaders break addiction, regulate their nervous system, rebuild a grounded, lived in faith. He's a former pastor turned wilderness guide, and he blends spiritual depth with real world grit using tools like breath work, cold exposure, and disciplined decision making to help men steady themselves when life feels out of control. He's the host of the Sacred Grit podcast. Jason speaks to men who are done going it alone and ready to lead themselves and their families with strength and clarity. So today we're going to get into what it actually takes to rebuild from the ground up and why resilience is something you train and not something you wait for. Jason, welcome. Welcome to Truth Tastes Funny.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. It's great to be here. It is great to be here. Actually, that is as good, but I think that's kind of subliminal. I think that I've been thinking a lot about men's mental health lately. Fortunately, people are talking about it, but I think unfortunately, not enough. You
Yeah.
know, do you feel that there is, um, kind of a little bit of a hole in the world of men's mental health?
Yeah, man. I mean, we're dropping like flies, brother. I mean, it's rather, I was just having this conversation with my partner earlier. I had a kid book a consultation call with me. And when he came up on Zoom, it just shocked me because I mean, he was very young. He was 13
Yeah.
years old
Wow.
and struggling with pornography. And I said, well, buddy, I can't really coach you. You know, I'd have to talk to your parents. You know, I said, but maybe you should talk with your dad. He's like, well, unfortunately, my dad's not in the picture. And I
Right.
thought, we're in a culture of fatherless children, whether their father is not there at all or the father is there but not present, which I think that the latter might be more damaging than the former. And here's the thing, man: men committing suicide, men having affairs, men becoming alcoholics and drug addicts, and they're not able to access the help they need. We still have men, we're telling them, you need to go to therapy, you need to get in men's groups, you need to talk about your feelings. And dudes just don't resonate with those things
Yeah.
as much as they do if we can give them some tools in their toolbox and say, all right, man, here's a hammer, here's a screwdriver, here's a tape measure and a saw. Let's build your life. Let's repair your life instead of trying to get you to talk your way into thinking how you think that you ought to think. So yeah, man, it's a pandemic.
Well, you nailed something that I resonate with, which is, I mean, a lot of things, but this one really popped for me. The the fact that, you know, men are different when it comes to solving problems. And, I've never really gone to therapy. Everybody else in my, family, where I went through a divorce 20 years ago, my ex-wife and I went to couples therapy. My kids went to therapy, you know, but I never did, but it never felt like I don't need it. It just felt like that isn't, that doesn't, that I'd been around it a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't feel like it worked for me. But when you start thinking about being out in the world doing something, and thereby or therewith solving a problem, that does feel natural. So tell us a little bit about some of the work you do.
Yeah. So I can't tell you how many guys I've said, you'll have a therapist say, well, here's what you need to do. And they'll come to me and they'll say, well, I know what I need to do. That's not the problem. Most guys know what they need to do: be a better father, be a more present husband, be more calm, be less angry, don't drink as much, don't sit in front of the TV as much. But what they don't know how to do is how to actually do the thing that they know that they ought to do. So,
Yeah.
what I do is I teach mental resilience. So I think of it this way. So if you have your brain and your body has a connection, right? When you feel something in your body, what you feel sends a message to your brain, not the other way around. So when somebody gets ready to grab an Oreo cookie and eat it after they've already had 25, it's not because they think, oh, I want an Oreo cookie. It's because the body goes, we want another Oreo cookie. The brain grabs that information, grabs the cookie. Same thing with a cigarette, same thing with heroin, same thing with pornography, same thing with overuse of your phone. All behaviors that we don't want are are just feelings that begin in our body and come up to our brain. Well, a lot of people live with that pathway open, the signal to the brain, the signal to the brain. It just creates this compulsive behavior. We're always grabbing, scrolling, doom scrolling is a signal coming up, coming up, coming up. But we can't get the signal to go back down. So that is rational thought. I don't want to scroll anymore. We can't get that to go, well, then I'm going to stop scrolling. I don't want to watch porn anymore. I don't want to smoke anymore. And that signal from the brain back down has been stopped. And I have found that to be true mostly in men who have experienced some level of trauma. Now, we've also started to use the word trauma like tic tacs, like we just keep throwing it around. But I
Yeah.
tell men all the time, the worst thing that happened to you is the worst thing that happened to you. It doesn't matter if your father walked through the living room one day when you're 6 and said, you're just a worthless piece of junk, or if your dad just left and never came back. Or if your dad beat the ever loving snot out of you. Those are all traumas to your nervous system. So, what I teach men how to do is to reopen the pathway between the body and the brain and the brain and the body. I teach them how to bring signals up and send signals back down. And we have seen unbelievable uh, benefit from opening up those pathways, not only in my own body, it's changed my entire life. Is the reason why I do what I do, but also in other men's bodies. So what happens is all that information, those years of therapy or 12-step work or whatever it was that they have up here, all of a sudden finds its way down into the body, and they find themselves being able to go, oh my gosh, I have found the capacity to actually be the man that I want to be. Not the man I wish I was, not the man that I think I am, but the man that I actually am can come to life because I've learned how to control. I built the resilience to be able to hold my triggers, hold my thoughts, hold my impulses, and see them for what they are. And once I see them, go, no, 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 that's not the person I want to be anymore, and change my behavior.
Yeah. It leads me to wonder on a practical level when people find out about what you do and they're searching, a lot of times we're searching for answers. We know like you talked about, that intellectual resolution is not going to do it. But, what you described is really, quite visceral. Like it's like I can see where all the stuff that we have thought, all the input that we have had, not just the trauma, but the solutions and all the other things are just kind of blocked. But is there is there like a science that to this
Oh,
that
yeah.
you yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, nervous system regulation. So Basil van der Kolk, Peter Levine, and there's another guy who wrote the polyvagal theory. I can't remember his name. These are all frontline clinicians. Basil Vanderkolk wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So here's what happens, and we know this to be a fact. If this is your spine, are we on video?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Although there are some people that are not watching on YouTube, they may be listening on Apple, but
Okay,
um,
so I'm using my forearm as my spinal column, and on
right.
top of my forearm, I'm making a fist. And inside my fist, I have my thumb tucked. So my thumb is up against my palm, and my other four fingers are over my thumb. And what I'm using this to do is illustrate my brain. And up my spinal column comes signals. And so I'm running my finger up my forearm. And when those signals come up my spinal column, they come through this little thing here, and I'm illustrating that with my thumb, called the amygdala. The amygdala propercepts, it's a smoke alarm for the body. It propercepts, is this danger? So it is where I get my fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. If this amygdala propercepts the feeling that I have is danger, this thing right here, and for those of the listening audience, I'm running my fingers across my four knuckles of my hand, that unhinges. So it flips. And in the clinical world, they say we flip our lid. And so
Hmm.
this little guy, the amygdala, gets full control and say over the body because it has perceived threat. Well, what happens when it perceives threat? It does whatever it takes to make the body feel safe. Sometimes that's anxiety, sometimes that's depression, sometimes that's a cigarette, sometimes that's caffeine, sometimes that's methamphetamine, sometimes that's heroin, sometimes that's anger, sometimes that's fear, sometimes that, you name it. But this takes over, and that's the signal the body runs off of. So literally, if a man is going, I really don't want to do this, it doesn't matter what he really wants to do because the fight or flight response is in control. Whether or not he's in real danger or not, if it perceives it as danger, then it is running the show. And I have found this to be true. When a man has an external action that does not match his internal desire, his autonomic nervous system, his nervous system in general, is dysregulated. What I do is I teach men how to close that lid. For the listening audience, I'm letting my fingers fold back down over my thumb. And now he can access rational thought to his emotional center and down regulate top to bottom regulation, down regulate his body while the body is also up regulating to the mind. So between those two ways of regulating in the body, because we know now we have a brain in our stomach. Your stomach has as many neuroreceptors as a cat's brain does. So when the term we've used for thousands of years, a gut feeling, a gut
Yeah.
reaction, I could feel it in the pit of my, when we know now scientifically that is actually true. So we're connecting this body and this brain. Now, I'm a former pastor. So now we'll add a spiritual component to this, not Christianity. Don't run off in that world with me. Just stay spiritual with me. There's a God component to this because inside of my body, there's this thing called a vagus nerve. This vagus nerve it communicates with the lungs and the heart and the liver and the brain. And all these pieces come together to let the body and the brain connect. And once they do, we get access to this other thing. We call it whatever you want to. I'll just call it logical thought. But my morals and my behaviors can become one, and my actions start to present themselves in a way that I become the man that I want to be. And that, my friend, is spirituality. When I'm able to go to bed at night, look in the mirror and go, I am proud of the man I was today, or I'll wake up in the morning and go, I am proud of the man I am this morning and will be today. I have found my spiritual center because not only do I have signals from my brain going into my body, I have signals from my body coming back up into my brain, and I'm a whole human being.
Wow, that is a better answer than I even would have anticipated as far as the science of it, Jason. But I wanted to get to that
Yeah.
because there's so many components to it would be great to approach this conversation even as just an inspiration. But
Yeah.
I've seen too much to believe that it's that easy. In other words, somebody says, "Oh, well, this is great. I'll just do this or I'll just do that." And to that point, what happens when uh, explain the process to the audience of someone reaching out or being coached or being participating in some of your programs. Walk us through a hypothetical of what can happen because people can get really into something and really start to make a commitment and make a change, and then they can relapse and go back into their old ways, fall prey to doubt. Just maybe walk us through a case study, but like a theoretical.
100%. Yeah. So here's the thing: there are no magic pills in the world of never. Like there's no such thing as a magic pill. So what I mean by that is a lot of guys will hop into cold water, they'll do a round of breath work and like, oh my God, I feel so much better. All they've done is open up the pathway between the brain and the body. Now, that's a big deal, but it is simple. Open up the pathway between your brain and your body is as simple as taking a deep breath as you can, hold it for 5 seconds, then take another sip for 5 seconds and let it go. And everybody go, God, it feels amazing. Yeah, you just connected your brain and your body. What you do with that opening is what matters. So for Sacred Grit, we do a 12-week coaching program because that is enough to get someone started and to train new habits that give them an open nervous system so they can do the work. Um, it's just like running a marathon, Hersh. If somebody were to tell me today, if they were to say, hey, Jason, I want to run a marathon in 6 months, and I were to say, well, how far can you run right now? And they said, I could probably walk half a mile. Well, I'm not going to say, well, get up in the morning and run 5 miles. I'm going to say, okay, you can walk half a mile tomorrow morning, meet me. We're going to walk half a mile and let's start seeing where we're at. And we'll work our way up to 26.2 miles. But if I were to run marathons the rest of my life, I have to maintain a certain level of fitness and ability to be able to do so. Same thing with weightlifting, same thing with earning a new degree. We have to train our way into understanding how the mind and body connection works, and then also train that muscle between the mind and the body. So, what I do in those 12 weeks, we have a 4 hour session together in the beginning, and that's how I do it for now. I'm actually working on a 4 hour course that will teach the very basics of the Sacred Grit method, which is yoga, meditation, cold water immersion, and breath work. And then I have a fifth component over journaling. And so they learn those pieces first. Then we design them a daily practice. And it's not 2 hours every morning. Sometimes it's an hour, but for most guys, it ends up somewhere around half an hour, and it will include some mode of nervous system regulation. Most guys will push back against parts of it, but I let them start working wherever they feel comfortable. Then we start tracking data. They have a morning form they fill out. It takes them maybe 5 minutes to fill it out and ask questions like, what's the kind of man I want to be today? How much sleep did I get? Did I wake up on time? Am I going to do a practice today? It's okay. So we collect data. They come back in the evening, they fill out another form. Did I practice today? What was my quality of life today? Was I in control of my decisions today? What kind of practice did I do today? Over 12 weeks, we start finding patterns inside the data that also allows us to adjust their practice. That's the big thing we do. And then once a week, we check in via Zoom. They're able to tell me what they have going on. I'm able to hear what they're saying. They share some of their journal entries with me. I see some of their data across that form. But over 12 weeks, by the time they get ready to take off, now they have this entire system. They understand how to train their nervous system, and they'll still check in with me for a session here and there as we go, after the 12 weeks. But those are just for tuning up because I've given them the tools. And I can't tell you how many therapists will call me and say, oh my God, I have a new client to work with. I'm like, yeah, I know, because they can get the body and the brain talking to each other, and they're not just haphazardly taking in information that they can't do anything with.
And so now these men have uh, a pathway to make therapy work for them.
Yes. Yes.
So it isn't an alternative to therapy. It's really upstream of therapy in the sense that we're familiar with it, which
Yeah.
is fantastic. Is there still um, what we talked about in the beginning, the or alluded to the stigma of, of any, like even the idea of journaling or doing it, is there still resistance at that level in the very beginning of this process?
Yeah, man, unfortunately, it's just getting dudes to do anything that revolves around talking about their feelings is like, pulling eye teeth, as my grandfather used to say. But they also, most of the time, when a guy comes to the place to where he's paying me to coach him through this process, he either has a wife who's saying do something or else, or he's really made a mess out of his life. So a lot of times it's like, dude, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just tell me what you need me to do. And then if I can get him to start seeing the benefit of it. And then most of the time, I would say, let's not say most, 65 to 70% of the time before we get to the end, I'm giving him the phone number. I have 4 really good therapists that I work with, and he's getting that phone number because he realizes in that process somewhere he really has some stuff he has to unpack. And once I have his nervous system open, the therapist I work with, they know how I work, and they know that when he calls and it's terminal, right? Like he's not going to be in therapy the rest of his life. He has 6 to 8 sessions unless he has a real complex trauma. He has 6 to 8 sessions with a good therapist that can get in there and help him make some sense out of what he has going on in his life. Nervous system's open. He could download all that information into his body, and away he goes. And he's a brand new man. But the resistance usually comes with, dude, just saying, I need some help. And
Yeah.
I can't tell you, Hersh, I'll have 4 or 5 people a week book a consultation call and not show up on the call. It's like they're terrified of getting better,
Yeah.
but if they ever do just take that step, we can get them the help they want.
Yeah. Is there and of course you can't help everybody, and any of us in what we do in life are more apt to help people who recognize that there is a problem that they need to solve and have at least that recognition. Um is there anything that you've thought of as as something? Here's how I would think of it. Is there something that you're putting out into the world where you're thinking more like thought leadership that can actually change the dynamic of the conversation, which is now pulling back from, your work, your program. I know you're working on a new book. Yeah, let's pull back a little bit and think about it in a more global sense.
Yeah, to me, it's like we've got to start creating movements where men, this feels normalized and it doesn't feel like they're being a wimp for asking for help. And so that's the other half of what I do is Adventures in Recovery, which we literally call it AIR Georgia, which is an acronym for Adventures in Recovery. So it's AIR Georgia, and this is a free site. Men can join this thing. There's Zoom calls twice a month. There's an adventure once a month. There's 2 hiking trips a year. There's a huge adventure every summer. We're going to Colorado this year to summit 14,000 foot peaks. We rock climb, we fly fish, we go to sound bowl experiences, yoga. I mean, we do all manner of things together. But this movement where men have peer led camaraderie, not some guru who's sitting on a freaking cushion somewhere lecturing about a higher understanding, right? But just a real group of men that are slapping each other on the back and saying, dude, you're not alone. If we could get that movement going, this nervous system regulation stuff is so easy, but they need a coach. It's no different than if they were getting ready, like I said, run a marathon, learn how to weight lift, be an Olympic lifter, and to destigmatize. Because here's the thing, if men start to see it work, they'll do anything they need to do. But men are curious by nature and skeptical by the exact same nature. That's what kept us alive for so long. Maybe I shouldn't go into that cave, but I'm going to anyhow, right? Because that's
Right.
where the prey is that I need to get to feed my family. So I think by normalizing this thing, and dude, when I start telling guys stuff like cold water immersion, they get that male bravado. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Or how long can you hold your breath? Or can you meditate for 10 minutes instead of 5? that thing, that measuring thing, that measuring of time and ability gives men power. It gives them control. So I think for the future of Sacred Grit, we have Air Georgia, we have Air Chattanooga, we want to start an Air North Carolina. I want to get as many of those chapters going as I can, because that's less about the coaching and more about just men having the community. And then I could coach, thousands of people remotely. That's easy to do because I can create videos and courses and other men to help. So globally, that's just the bigger vision there.
Yeah, so there definitely is a bigger vision, and
Yeah.
at that point, um, it might make that entryway easier for
Yeah.
guys,
Yeah.
and that's what would be really powerful in the big picture, is to just evolve
Yeah.
our thinking around this, not to change how men are, but to understand how men are, and be sensitive within that, within that context. And then and finally, if you want to share a little, I don't know, I know it's not quite ready yet, but if you want to share a little about the book, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, well, the book that's coming out is called Sacred Grit, and it's a memoir. And it's really, we've kind of found out that the story, my story, I was a pastor that had a sex addiction, and I ended up losing my job, and all manner of things, and was on the edge of suicide, and had a plan and everything. And these practices literally changed my life. And so, Sacred Grit is the story of my journey from a complete collapse all the way to healing my nervous system, which is what I did. And so that'll come out in April. And then I'm writing a follow-up book that'll be called Taming the Beast. And it's a nervous system regulation field guide for men. And all of my books, my writing is short. My chapters are short, to the point. It is written for a dude to set it on the back of his toilet, and he can read it in little spurts really fast. He's not having to dissect, scientific pontifications, right? He's just I've got meat in there. And so that the first one will be coming out hopefully into April, 1st of May. The next one will be next year before it gets out. But dude, really, the Sacred Grit podcast, if a guy goes on there and listens to the podcast, it's a monologue. It's just me teaching all these things. And there's 2 episodes a week, Sunday and Wednesday, and he can gather all manner of information just by listening to that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Jason, this has been wonderful.
Yeah.
I would love for you to just take us out with a piece of advice or inspiration to guys out there who just haven't quite stepped up to the solution yet.
Get up every single morning, and when your feet hit the floor, take 5 minutes to do something that makes you feel loved by yourself. And when I say makes you feel loved by yourself, I mean that when you get through, you're proud of yourself that you did whatever that was for 5 minutes. Maybe it's 5 minutes of push ups. Maybe it's a 5 minute walk. Maybe it's a cup of coffee on the back porch. Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's a cold shower. Maybe it's a cold tub. Maybe it's yoga. Maybe it's meditation. Whatever it is that you do, my brother, do it for 5 minutes, because I am a firm believer, above and beyond everything else, that if I love myself first, if I start my morning with loving myself practically, I can take that out into the world, and I can change the world, because I have started by loving myself in a very practical way. I can love my neighbor, and by virtue of that, I can love this larger energy that some call the universe, some call God, some call it all manner of things. Maybe you just call it love. That's fine. But you can move into that space and be the best version of yourself.
Thank you, Jason. That was fantastic, and I really appreciate the time, the insight,
Yeah.
and all the wonderful information.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.